in many ways.
Yes. Thank you very much. My time has expired. Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Dr. Miller, obviously you and I are the same age. I was 9 years old that summer, and July 1969 will ever be imprinted in my mind, not just because of Apollo, but because I had an appendectomy 2 weeks before the landing. So that's a really memorable month in my lifetime. Three of my four grandparents were born before Kitty Hawk. So as a kid, I can remember the discussion amongst the elders about, was this real? Was this cost effective? But this was a generation literally that had been born before modern air flight. That said, and I address my questions to all of you, and whoever wants to speak can, but just from a perspective, in your opinion each, what was the most significant impact of the Apollo missions? If you can grind it down, either, any, or.
I think I captured it in my statement, and I would go back to, it's that if we can have a mission that we believe in, and we put the appropriate resources to it, and I think if we can show our trust and respect for the younger generation, which Apollo was, they could achieve extraordinary things. And I think we're seeing that today. I think we're seeing that in these emerging commercial sector for launch and satellites. They're hiring up my students like crazy. It's no longer their grandparents' space program. It's their space program, and they're just catching fire. And we're seeing it again, and I hope it stays. Yeah.
I think it's important to appreciate that it was literally impossible when Kennedy said do it, and Americans love to be told something's impossible and then prove that it's possible. And the people, Apollo is often cast as a kind of heroic story, and in some ways it is, but there were no superheroes. There were just ordinary Americans, and in the last 4 years I've had the wonderful chance to talk to literally hundreds of people who worked on Apollo, and they will tell you that the mission got out of them a quality of work, a caliber of work that they would not have been capable of otherwise. So ordinary Americans like to be asked to do something that seems almost unachievable and then prove that it is achievable in service of a larger mission. And I think we have lost track of that a little bit, but we like to work together, and we like to rise to the occasion.
Speaking from the museum perspective, we're fortunate at the Smithsonian to be the custodian for the American people of the Apollo 11 spacecraft, the actual artifact that accomplished this mission that we've been talking about. And our museum, the Air and Space Museum, is filled with many amazing objects. But I often say that the museum is the place where the hardware and the humanity intersect, because every object that we have, every artifact that we have, represents people. Somebody designed it, somebody flew it, somebody maintained it, somebody formed a company to promote it, somebody worked in an industry to support it. It's really all about people. There's a famous story, it's probably apocryphal, but it's one of those good apocryphal stories that does make a meaningful point. During the Apollo era, a custodial worker at NASA was asked, well, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And he said, I'm helping us get to the moon. And that, it still kind of chokes me up when I hear that, because it really does say, what is Apollo about? Apollo is about all of us finding what's the best in ourselves and applying it to a common goal. And if we can do that, again, there's no limit to what we can achieve. One of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain was, he said, history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I think by reflecting on the anniversary of Apollo, perhaps we can induce it to rhyme for us and bring us to another achievement that we can celebrate again in the future.
In the time I have left, I'd like to focus for a moment, not just on the pieces that brought all this together, but thinking about where we go and how important those same pieces are in the future. and again, anyone that cared to touch on this. But when I went through and looked at essentially the contractors who played a significant role in the Apollo program, huge number. North American Rockwell, now Boeing, built portions of the command and service module, as I proudly noted earlier in my home state of Oklahoma. Boeing also built the Saturn V rocket. Lockheed Martin and Thiokol, now Northrop Grumman, built the launch escape system. Rocketdyne, now Aerojet Rocketdyne, built the F-1 and J-2 rocket engines. General Dynamics built the communications transponders. Pratt & Whitney, now UTC, built the fuel cells. Northrop Grumman built the lunar module. Raytheon built the guidance computer. Honeywell built the environmental control system. Avco, now Textron, built the heat shield. Harris, now L3 Harris, built the telemetry systems. Looking back at how important that robust industrial base was to the success of Apollo, how important is that as a robust industrial base going to be for our future efforts? Because if we don't have those kind of people to put the pieces together.
So let me add to that, that they also came under contract on the duration of weeks. Is how we, they had to gear up fast, and it all came together. But I think, there's been a lot of consolidation in the aerospace field, and, a lot of that knowledge is still out there. But I think what we're seeing now is the emergence of the commercial sector. And, and that ties in with, again, it's really the younger generation that's going into these startup companies. They're no longer startups, they're real. Because I've seen over years launch companies come and go, and here's just yet another, but no. That's all changed now. And they've demonstrated that they deserve a role in making this happen. And so I think that's where we're going to see these new capabilities come along. And I'll add that it's essential that as we do exploration, we have to bring the commercial sector along. I'll use an example, Magellan. He explored, circumnavigated the globe, or almost made it, but he did not operate the port he left from. He did not build his ships. He did not grow the food on his ships. Some part of the economy was used to do that. Once he was outside the edge of that harbor, he was exploring. Apollo, that edge of the commercial harbor was on the ground at Cape Kennedy. Right now, that edge of the commercial harbor is in orbit around Earth. So as NASA moves out further, they've got to pull the commercial sector because they cannot support the entire logistics trail.
Mr. Fishman?
I think one of the most exciting developments is SpaceX and Elon Musk and Blue Origin and Jeff Bezos, Robert Bigelow Aerospace. There is this whole wave of companies, private companies, that inspired, in fact, by that era, by Apollo, are doing things that we would never have imagined 20 years ago. And so the roster you read off is really impressive, and those companies still do impressive things. What's interesting is that in some ways, the most dramatic innovation in rocketry is coming from SpaceX and Blue Origin. Those guys want to create what seems almost unimaginable now, but a Southwest Airlines, essentially, of space travel. Jeff Bezos talks about launching every Thursday. If you don't get on the Blue Origin rocket this Thursday, it's going again next Thursday. There are only between 90 and 100 launches a year worldwide now. If Jeff Bezos is launching to space 52 times a year in 5 years, that will be part of the transformation that sort of creates a space economy. And so there's going to be a role for R&D for the NASA side and a role for a space economy that is dynamic and innovative and also self-sustaining.
My time's expired. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you.